There is a moment that happens in hospitals, in quiet bedrooms, in the back seats of cars after accidents, that nobody prepares you for. It's not the pain, it's not the fear of what comes after. It's something far worse than both of those things combined. It's the sudden, crushing realization that there were words you never said, names you never called, doors you walked out of without looking back, because you were certain, absolutely certain, that there would be more time. Most people don't talk about this. Not really. They talk about death in the abstract. They talk about wills and funerals and who gets the house. But nobody sits down and tells you the truth, that the thing which will haunt you most in your final hours won't be what you did. It will be what you left unsaid. There are people right now, people your age, people who lived full lives, who loved deeply, who worked hard, lying in silence, staring at a ceiling, replaying one conversation they never had, one phone call they kept postponing, one moment where they stood at the edge of saying something real and turned away. And the terrifying part, they never saw it coming either. They thought exactly what you might be thinking right now, that there's still time, that things will smooth over on their own, that people who love each other don't need to say it out loud. But some doors, once closed, don't open again, and what waits on the other side of that silence is something you are not ready for. Think about the last time you truly spoke to someone you love. Not small talk, not how was your day or dinner's ready. Think about the last time you sat across from someone, your son, your brother, your oldest friend, and said something that actually mattered, something real, something from the part of you that you usually keep locked away. Can you remember it? Most people can't, and that's not because they don't care. It's because somewhere along the way, life convinced them that the important conversations could wait, that there would be a better moment. But here's what nobody tells you about that better moment. It almost never comes, and when it does, when life finally slows down enough for honesty, sometimes the person you needed to talk to is already gone. A man named Raymond lived his entire adult life 3 miles from his father. 3 miles he could drive there in 7 minutes. He knew the route by heart. But for 11 years, he didn't make that drive. Not because of hatred, not because of some dramatic falling out, just because of something quieter and more dangerous than either of those things: pride. A cold, silent, stubborn pride that both men wore like armor, waiting for the other one to move first. Then one Tuesday morning, Raymond's brother called him. Their father had been taken to the hospital overnight. By the time Raymond got there, his father was conscious but barely. He was sitting up slightly in the hospital bed, looking older than Raymond had ever seen him look. And when their eyes met across that room, something happened that Raymond has never been able to fully explain to anyone. His father smiled, not a big smile, just a small, tired, knowing smile, like a man who had finally put down something very heavy, and Raymond opened his mouth to speak, to say the thing he had been rehearsing for 11 years. The apology, the explanation, the 3 words he had never once said to this man in his entire life. But his father raised one hand slowly, just slightly, and shook his head. Not in anger, not in rejection, in forgiveness. Raymond stood there and understood in that moment that his father was letting him off the hook, that the old man had already done the work of forgiving him long before that hospital room, that somewhere in those 11 years of silence, his father had made his peace, and that destroyed Raymond more than any argument ever could have. Because he hadn't made his peace. He wasn't ready. He still had things to say, real things, painful things, things that needed to be spoken out loud to be real. And now, standing in that quiet hospital room with the machines beeping softly in the background, he realized that the conversation he had been postponing for over a decade was about to expire. His father passed away 4 days later. Raymond is in his late 60s now. He has a son of his own, a grown man who lives across the country. They talk occasionally, holidays, birthdays, the usual surface-level exchanges that feel like connection but aren't really. And sometimes Raymond catches himself thinking about that hospital room, about that small, tired smile, about the words that never made it out of his throat in time. And then he looks at his phone, his son's number right there on the screen, and he puts it down because he tells himself, there's still time, there's still time. That thought, that quiet, comfortable, dangerous thought, that is the thing you should be terrified of. Not death itself, not the pain of it, not the unknown of it, but the version of you that keeps waiting, right up until the moment when waiting is no longer an option. And what comes after that moment is the part nobody survives unchanged. There is a psychological term that researchers rarely bring into everyday conversation. It's called anticipated regret. It means the pain you feel not from something that has already happened, but from something you can see coming and still cannot stop yourself from walking toward. Most people who study human behavior will tell you that the fear of death is primal, hardwired, ancient, but what they don't say loudly enough is this. For a significant portion of men over 50, the fear isn't death itself. It's the specific, suffocating terror of dying in the middle of an unfinished sentence. Raymond's story isn't rare, it just rarely gets spoken out loud, because men, especially men of a certain generation, were taught something very early and very quietly. They were taught that silence was strength, that needing to explain yourself was weakness, that love was something you showed through action, through showing up, through providing, through being present in all the practical ways that keep a family functioning. Nobody told them that one day, the people they loved most might need to hear the words more than they needed anything else they had ever provided. And so they built their lives on that silent foundation. And for a long time, it worked. Or at least, it looked like it worked. Until it didn't. There's a man named David, 63 years old, retired 2 years ago after 4 decades in the same profession. By every visible measure, his life was a success. He raised his son largely on his own after her passing his late 30s. He worked, he sacrificed, he never complained, and his son, now in his mid-30s, respects him deeply. Genuinely, you can see it in the way the younger man talks about his father to other people. But here is the twist that David himself only discovered 18 months ago. His son doesn't know his father is proud of him. Not because David isn't proud, he is enormously, privately, in the way that keeps a man warm on difficult nights. But he has never said it. Not directly, not clearly, not in a way that his son could hold on to. David assumed his son knew. The way you assume the people closest to you can simply feel what you feel without needing a translation. Then one evening, David overheard a phone conversation his son was talking to a close friend. Relaxed, unguarded, the way men only speak when they think no one important is listening. And David heard his son say something that stopped him completely. He heard his son say, "I just never really knew where I stood with him." I still don't. David stood in that hallway for a long time after the call ended. 35 years of love, 35 years of sacrifice and presence and quiet devotion. And the person he had done it all for, the one human being whose opinion mattered more to him than anyone else on earth, had spent his entire adult life unsure of where he stood. That moment didn't break David, but it cracked something open inside him that he hadn't known was sealed shut. And what made it worse, what made it the kind of realization that follows you into sleep, was that David understood, standing in that hallway, that he had done exactly what his own father had done to him. The same silence, passed down like an inheritance nobody asked for, the same assumption that love didn't need language, the same invisible wall between two people who would each take a bullet for the other, but could not manage 3 honest sentences across a dinner table. He picked up his phone that night, stared at his son's name for a long time, then he set it back down. Not because he didn't want to call, but because he didn't know how to start. After 63 years of saying the right things in the wrong ways, or saying nothing at all, he genuinely did not know how to begin. And that is where it gets truly terrifying. Because some silences go on so long that the silence itself becomes the relationship. And breaking it doesn't feel like healing. It feels like surgery without anesthesia. What David did next and what it cost him is the part of this story that changes everything. David picked up the phone 3 weeks later, not because he had figured out what to say, but because his doctor had said something during a routine checkup that made the hallway moment feel suddenly urgent in a way he couldn't ignore. Nothing dramatic, nothing immediately life-threatening, just the kind of quiet medical reality that arrives in your 60s like a letter you were always expecting but never truly prepared to open. He called his son on a Sunday afternoon. His son answered on the second ring, slightly surprised, because David never called without a reason. They exchanged the usual opening lines, the small, safe sentences that men use to warm up to something bigger. And then David stopped, right in the middle of a sentence about nothing. Just stopped. His son asked if everything was okay, and David said, "I heard you on the phone a few weeks ago. I wasn't trying to listen, but I heard what you said." The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds, but inside those few seconds lived 35 years of everything that had never been spoken between them. His son didn't deny it, didn't deflect. He just said, very quietly, "Yeah." And David said, "You were right." He didn't explain it further than that. He didn't launch into a rehearsed speech. He just acknowledged it, plainly, the way a man acknowledges a truth he has been carrying too long to dress it up anymore. And then he said the other thing, the thing he had never said in 35 years, not on birthdays, not at graduations, not even at the moments in life when it would have been the most natural thing in the world to say it. He said, "I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you, and I should have said that a long time ago." There was a long pause, and then his son laughed. Not a happy laugh, not a sad laugh. The kind of laugh that comes out of a person when something lands so directly on the center of an old wound that the body doesn't know how to respond except to release the pressure somehow. And then his son said, "Why now, Dad?" David thought about that question for a moment, and he answered honestly. He said, "Because I got tired of waiting for the right moment and realizing the right moment was every moment I didn't say it." Here is the twist that nobody who hears this story expects. David's son had written him a letter 4 years earlier. A real letter, handwritten, 3 pages long. Everything he had wanted to say. The confusion, the love, the longing for something he couldn't name, the pride he also felt but couldn't express. He had written it, sealed it, and then never sent it. It was sitting in the drawer of his desk at home, had been sitting there for 4 years. He told David about the letter during that phone call. David asked if he could read it someday. His son said, "I'll do better than that." He read it to him, over the phone, right then, all 3 pages. And David sat in his kitchen and listened to his son's voice reading words that had been waiting in a drawer for 4 years. Words that could have changed the texture of their relationship years ago. And he didn't say anything at all, because there was nothing to say that the silence couldn't hold better in that moment. 2 men, 1 phone call, 4 years of an unsent letter, 35 years of an unspoken truth. And here is what that story leaves you with. The thing that should stay with you long after this ends. Somewhere in your life right now, there is an unsent letter. Maybe it's not on paper. Maybe it lives in the back of your throat. Maybe it shows up at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep and you stare at the ceiling running through conversations you never finished. The question isn't whether you have something left to say. You do, you know you do. The question is whether you are going to be David before the phone call or David after it. Because the difference between those 2 versions of the same man isn't courage. It isn't the perfect words. It isn't the right moment finally arriving. It's just a Sunday afternoon and a second ring. That's all it ever was.